So here's our agenda. We're going to start with the introductions and go over the ground rules. The ground rules are really simple. Please be interactive. If you have a question or you want to jump in, just let us know. Chat with us, unmute your microphone, and we're happy to field questions along the way. As I mentioned, you'll see that there are some other folks from Advantexe on this session, primarily Sydney Freeman and Jason Singer. They're acting as what we call the producers of this session. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that role in a second. I want to talk about why are we here and give you some data and some feedback and some best practices. Give you some background on the evolution and building of virtual learning journeys. And I'm also going to spend some time giving you some perspectives. As the president and CEO of Advantexe and somebody who's been in the learning world for over 30 years, I will give opinion and I will give perspective and points of view. And I hope that you enjoy them. Some of them could be provocative. Some of them could be things that you haven't heard about before. And that's why we're here. We're here to let people have a dialogue. And then the primary part of the session today is on what I'm calling the 10 rules of virtual learning. These are rules that just didn't pop up in the last 2 weeks. These are rules of virtual learning that have been in process for many years and, as a matter of fact, many decades in the works. I want to share with you a sample virtual learning journey roadmap. What does it look like? What does it feel like? How do we take those 10 rules of virtual learning and apply them to something that's actual, something that you can start to do and deploy in your organizations in the next couple of weeks, not months, not several months, but in the next couple of weeks. And then we'll end it up with a Q&A. So again, as I said, I'm Rob Brodo, President and CEO of Advantexe. A pleasure to be with you. And I'd like to hear from you. And so one of the primary rules of virtual learning is interactivity. And so we are going to launch one of our first polls. And so the poll is going to ask you all the following question. Why are you here? And you can have some choices. And what I'd like you to do, as you'll take a look at this, it's multiple choice. Please click on any or all of or some of the reasons why you're here today. And we're going to give it 45 seconds, and then we'll see what the results look like. And while you are voting, I'll give you some color commentary on some of the polling and interactivity. You want to keep this process pretty tight. And so what we've discovered is about 45 seconds to 60 seconds is a good amount of time. Once it goes over that, you always want to be very cognizant of losing people. And so we're just approaching the 50-second mark, and we're at about half of the folks here. All right, let's end the poll. So here's what we have showing the poll results. Overwhelming 94% to learn more about different ideas for developing and deploying virtual learning. Fantastic. We have 8 out of 16, 50%, learn more about virtual simulations. That's great. Oh, I'm so glad. Nobody said my boss made me come. I like that. And then 6 of you, 38%, said, let's hear from colleagues about their situation. So that's great. Let's make sure that we're covering that as we go through. Thank you, Jason, for running that. All right, we're going to close that up. And let's go to the next slide here. All right, interactivity, dialogue, background. We have some data, very good data from several very reliable sources that we will reference and source in the follow-up materials that are saying by the year 2025, the global e-learning market will be more than $325 billion in size. And I want you to just take a moment to absorb that number. And I want to do something to give you some perspective on that. And my perspective is, think for a moment about the top 50 global pharmaceutical companies in the world. And right now, obviously, we are in a global health crisis where many companies are announcing that they're putting money into R&D for new drug development and testing and all of that. Here's our next poll question. As you think about this question, we are now in a place where we want to take a look at what is the total amount of money invested by the top 50. That's basically every pharmaceutical company in the world. How much money do you think they're spending on R&D? How much did they spend in the year 2019? Go ahead, the poll is now open. All right, we are at 1 minute and we are going to close the poll. All right, so we have the majority of folks on our call today say that it's 328 billion. All right, so I'm going to close this down and I'm going to show you the actual answer. The actual answer is 127 billion. So just again, take that in for a moment. By the year 2025, the global market for all e-learning in the world will be about about double of what's being spent currently by the top pharmaceutical companies in the world. And so the takeaway here is that this is an exploding market. There are tremendous opportunities. And to me, most importantly, I think there's going to be an expectation of learners that e-learning, virtual learning, simulations, and other sorts of tools will be the norm. And so I just wanted to give you some perspective. To follow that up, I also am going to share with you some interesting data that we have kept track of for over 30 years. What you're looking at here is a graph that shows you from the year 1985 to the year 2025, which is our projected data point looking forward, of the average length of time a typical business acumen program took. In 1985, it was about 4.3 days. And as you see this chart, you'll see that it was a slow acceleration downward for the first 10 years, but then fairly drastic from 1995 on till today in 2020, basically the same program concepts of things around strategic thinking, financial management, metrics of performance, and so forth, that used to be over 4 days is now being delivered, or the request to being delivered, in 1 day's worth of time. Or put another way, about 8 hours of learning down from 20. And that's created significant challenges, but also significant opportunities in terms of virtual. The next graphic that I wanted to show you was the number and relationship between the in-person deliveries of programs versus virtual. And again, this is taking a look at a 30-year perspective. And so obviously in 1985, which for those of you who remember was actually before the personal computer was invented, 100% of the work that we were involved with was delivered in person. And it was that way for a number of years. And then starting with the dot-com boom and the e-learning and what used to be called CBT sort of training, computer-based training in the mid-90s to the 2000s, it was still a fairly innocuous erosion of the in-person. When we get to 2020, which is today and tomorrow, you will see that there's a drastic change. Now, obviously, some of that is because of the pandemic, but you'll see over the last couple of years more and more of the deliveries have been moving towards virtual. And between 2015 and 2020, we saw at Advantexe about 30% of our total number of deliveries go virtual, which is a pretty significant number. Now, of course, today it's 100%. And folks, as we go through this, happy to answer any questions. If you have comments, feel free to jump in, message Jason, and Jason will pause me and I will answer any questions. Okay, so here's a story. Based on some of this data, based on some of the things we were seeing in the marketplace, I, as the president and CEO of Advantexe, made a mandate to our company that we had a goal by the year 2020, every single learning asset that we have in our organization should be developed to be delivered virtually. And that was really based upon the trends. That meant all of our content, all of the simulations, all of the tools, including things like virtual role playing. It was a mandate to the company. People looked at me like I was crazy. Like, what are you talking about? Why are you doing this? This is so much work. You're making such a big investment. And I said, I just have this feeling, and I really am looking at this data and seeing how users and learners are enjoying virtual. And so we need to do something about it. In addition to that, I also started something within our company called Work at Home Wednesdays. And the notion was that we should learn how to and practice working completely remotely. So every Wednesday, our entire office works remotely around the world, every single employee. And so for the past couple of years, we've been practicing and understanding how to work together. And so it's all of this mandate, our culture has gone into the things that I wanted to share with you today about how to develop virtual learning roadmaps.
Hey,
and
Rob,
so that, yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Quick question we have from Pam Tipton.
Great.
Was the virtual versus in-person based on your programs only or a market-based study?
Great question. This was ours only. I don't have access to a lot of other data. I tried to, but I figured for the purpose of today, one insight from our company would be interesting. So I hope that answered the question for you. All right, here they come. This is going to be fun. And please, again, feel free to message Jason. I'm happy to pause and answer any questions. Some of this, as I said, it'll be provocative, and I hope it'll be really thought-provoking as we go through this. So I'm going to share with you what we call the 10 rules of virtual learning. Rule number 1, I call this aggressive preparation. Basically, here's the thing. When you're delivering and creating virtual learning journeys, there is much less room for error. When you're in front of a classroom, when you're doing live in person, you can get away with a lot more. I call it tap dancing, that if something goes wrong, maybe the projector goes out or the internet goes out or something like that, there's things that you can do, and your people that are with you, they get it. But when you're in virtual and all they're seeing is you and the screen and the information, you have much less room for error. So you must go through aggressive preparation. If you fail to plan, then you're planning to fail. And that is something that I believe in very, very strongly. One of the tools and tips that I'll share with you is the creation of something called the play-by-play. Every single element is mapped out. It's time. Now, we all know that you can have the best laid plans and all the great timing, but people are asking, hello.
You are back.
I'm back. Well, there you go. We did that on purpose, actually.
Yes, we did. It was all planned, and I came right off the couch and filled right in. So
that was just a test. Best laid plans. Thank you, Jason, for making my internet take a little stumble.
That would be a good place to put that.
Yep. So contingency planning for internet outages, dropouts. Have somebody ready to step in at a moment's notice, just like that. Good job, guys. And then I also recommend when you're starting a virtual learning program, take about 5 to 7 minutes to make sure that everybody understands the system. Today, I just assumed most of you did, and I spent 30 seconds on it. But the best practice that we have learned is you need at least 5 to 7 minutes to just walk them through how that particular system works, whether it's Zoom or whether it's WebEx or God forbid, it's Skype. We're all going to have to be fairly agnostic in terms of the platform. Number 2, let's talk about content. Here we go. I believe very, very strongly all of our data, all of our research, all of our experience is saying that a content module can never be more than 45 minutes long. That's it. The days of an hour, hour and a half, 2-hour content module, it's not going to happen. You're going to lose people immediately. It must include collaborative discussions. It must include interactivity. So for example, one of the things that we have done in terms of pivoting and transitioning our content, one of our core modules that we do in strategic thinking is an introduction to something called the value discipline model. And basically this framework says in all of the world of corporate strategic thinking, there are only 3 different value propositions: customer intimacy, understanding your customer as well as, if not better than they understand themselves; operational excellence, driving the cost out of the system to offer customers the lowest possible price; and product leadership, which means you're the biggest, the baddest, the boldest, the brightest, the most innovative company in the marketplace. Now in the classroom, what I do is I go around and I talk to people and I walk in and out of the crowd. You can't do that virtually. So what we do here is we say, okay, everybody, we're going to run another poll. As I just defined, product leadership, which is companies that are really, truly innovative, that have put a stake in the ground of saying they're the most innovative companies in the market. Jason, put the poll up, please. So folks, who do you think is the most innovative company out of this list? Is it Apple, Tesla, Amazon, or Chick-fil-A?
And Rob, while they're weighing in there, we got a nice comment from Daniel. It seems the program participants have preparation to do as well, learning the systems, tools, etc., as well as doing the asynchronous content learning work. We find that to be very true as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I know Jason you've been producing a lot of our virtual learning journeys that you have found that some participants are really good at it and some, they really do struggle with it. Wow, this is interesting. All right, so there's a big smile on my face here because when we typically talk about who's the most innovative company on the planet, inevitably I get 70, 80% of the people say Apple. But here it looks like the big winner is Tesla. And in third place with 25% is Amazon. Now, what's interesting about Amazon is, yes, they do use technology. But Amazon's strategy, very, very clearly stated, is operational excellence. It's all about having big, bold servers and technologies to be able to handle the supply chain. It's really not about innovation. That's great. So again, that's an example, just a very quick example. You saw me get really super excited about the results here, and it gives you this chance to kind of talk through the content in a different way. And so there we have our poll results. All right. Number 3, interaction. If you're going to do virtual learning well, then you must integrate significant interaction. Again, I can't emphasize enough just having PowerPoints and doing the same thing that you do in a in-person classroom environment. It's not going to make it. And so what are some of these tools? These tools are things like simulations, role plays, case studies, polls, animations, videos, exercises. The platforms and the tools are such now that they really lend themselves very, very well. And what I'm about to show you, when I click the play button, one of the things that Zoom is so good at is that there is functionality that you can play a video like this in a central hub, and that every single participant would hear the videos. And so what that does for you is it gives you what I'm now calling a certain level of intimacy with the learning. So in this particular one, you're getting to meet Chris Wong, who is a character in the simulation. And we now have the opportunity of introducing Chris and what's Chris's personality style and what are some of the business challenges and business opportunities. And then we can put people into breakout rooms. And all of a sudden, you actually have a different sort of learning experience. So rule number 3 is all about interaction. And Jace, I'm going to look over to you. If there's any comments or questions, happy to pause at any point. All right. Rule number 4, breaks. This is something that it's taken us a while, quite candidly, to figure out. But here's the rules. You must give breaks much more often than you do in person. We believe that the minimum time for a break is 15 minutes. Meal breaks should be 45 to 60 minutes. And you also have the opportunity to inform your learners about what we're calling self breaks. So if they're going into a workshop, and for example, if they're doing a case study or if they're doing a simulation, and they're going to be off in their breakouts for 60, 90, or sometimes even 120 minutes, set the groundwork for them to talk amongst themselves about self-breaking. And the session, one of the sessions that we've already done this week, delivering a business acumen program for a pharmaceutical client, it was amazing for us to pop in and out of the virtual breakout rooms and just hear them create their own dialogue and their own cadence for the breaks. And it was really, really good. But the point here, rule number 4, is you must be very, very diligent about breaks, and you must also bring them back on time. So one of the things that we highly recommend is a digital timer, so that when they're in break, put that timer up so that people see the timer on the screen. The other thing that I'll just let you know that's come up quite a bit is don't let people sign out of the platform to go do something else, because what happens is in some of them, you're then going to have them sign back in. All right, number 5. Rule number 5 is called connections. All of your learning must include tools and exercises for human connection. Just leveraging the technology can be fairly cold. Just talking at people is not very effective. You must also give people at least 15 minutes upfront to develop a connection with each other. There's a concept that I've been calling virtual intimacy, and it's an interesting concept. Virtual intimacy is about getting to know people who could be thousands of miles away from you, and all you see is a picture of them. There they are right on their screen. And you have to create an environment where people are able to embrace that. So one of the things that we've been doing as part of our introductions is that we do something called virtual introductions. So it would be your name, your role and location, how long you've been at the company, and then to have some fun with it, we would say and ask people, what's the show that you've been binge watching the most during your quarantine? And it just was a nice little exercise to be an icebreaker that gave us the opportunity to get to know each other a little bit more, have some fun with it, and it creates virtual intimacy. Number 6, this is a big one. This is all about being present. And as we all know, it's easy to zone out. And it's easy to start looking at other things if you're not interested. What I believe is acknowledge the elephant in the room. Actually say to people, look, my challenge here as a facilitator of learning is that I have to be greater and my impact has to be more than the things that are calling you. Your email, your text, looking at the news. And so acknowledge that and position the value of what you're doing in terms of the fact that it's an investment. People are here in this room because your company is making an investment in learning, and let them know that they control the ROI. It's really on them. And so here's what I've been doing. I've been saying once and only once, listen, um, let's have a pact here. And basically the pact is if you will close all of your other media, close your browsers, close your email, put your phone away, in exchange for your attention and to be present, I promise you, you will have multiple breaks to be able to keep in touch and stay up to date on the things that you have to do. And so far, with a couple of hundred participants under our belt in terms of pure virtual learning, it's been working really, really well. And Jace, I'm looking over to you to see any other comments, anything that you wanted to add. I know you had some great experiences as our producer in terms of learner engagement.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's interesting. There's no comments on it, but it's interesting when we go into a virtual environment. People don't have the expectations set for them yet because they're not used to it. And what we've found is that if you lay this simple groundwork, they then have a mindset of, oh, okay, now I understand what we're doing. So it's easy to get pulled away, but if the content is engaging enough and you acknowledge that everyone's in the same boat as they are, then they kind of they'll pull themselves back in as needed.
Great, thanks, Jace. And then the last point that I wanted to mention, and again, this might be a little bit provocative, check in on them. Don't just think, oh, okay, you know, I'm talking to them virtually and they're doing exercises and simulations and all of that. Proactively check in. And so here's an example, something that we've been able to master. Jason does this extremely well. He'll watch and he'll notice people's interaction and are they doing the things that they should be doing in the breakout rooms, and he'll then go in and chat with them and basically say, hey Carl, this is Jason, your facilitator, want to see if you needed any help, is everything okay, if you do need some extra help, let's go into a chat room, I can explain things with you. And so we're very, very proactive on checking in with folks. So don't just be reactive to it. The comment here, the learning number 6 is be present, be proactive. All right, number 7, I call this treating people like adults. This isn't K through 12. This isn't your high schooler. This isn't your kid in elementary school who are trying to go through virtual lessons. These are adults. These are professionals being paid like professionals. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're creating an environment that's fun and informative, but it's treating people like adults. And one of the really interesting things that we have learned is that learners don't want to be babied. They want to be challenged. And so there's a really interesting dynamic here. You also want to be able to create safe zones of learning. And what I mean by that is you want people to feel comfortable to ask questions. You want them to feel comfortable to make mistakes. So if they're doing a poll or an exercise or simulation and their team doesn't do very well, you want to acknowledge that, but you also want to use it for learning. And so I'll give you a really interesting example. Yesterday when we were running a business acumen program, we had one of our teams on the verge of bankruptcy in the simulation, literally going bankrupt. And Jason and I were texting with each other, trying to help them out. We were very worried about them. But I just really, truly appreciated the fact that they were struggling, but they were learning and they felt comfortable asking the questions to take them out of bankruptcy. And they ended up doing very, very well after the 3rd year of the sim. So the topics in the content areas, they're serious and you need to treat them seriously. Even if they're uncomfortable with the content because we are challenging them, but that's why they're here. They're here to learn. So one of the mistakes that I'm seeing other folks making, and I'll just be open with you all, I think my clients are making, is that they're trying to give people in virtual learning content that's just too easy. And so I want to just make sure everybody understands that the expectation, especially when you go to virtual, is they're going to be challenged. And if they're not challenged, they're going to zone out. Number 8, make it impossible for them to check out. Think through what we're doing, how we're designing this. Present to them the roadmap for learning. Give them application and concepts that apply to their work today and will apply to the future work. Make it engaging, make it energetic. Now, I say this in a little bit of humor. It's not a Peloton class. So I don't know if any of you have been to Peloton classes, the instructors there, and they're yelling at you and they're dancing to music and they're having a great time. This is not that. This is a learning environment. So there's a balance here between energy and learning. Encourage lots of questions, and then anticipate the learning process. Make it competitive. So for example, let's say that there's going to be a winner of the simulation and we're going to base it upon this criteria. Give people the opportunity to achieve things, not badges, not gold stars, but achievements in learning for themselves. And make sure that everything that you do, the entire learning process, is built to give people not one aha moment, but multiple aha moments. Number 9, some learning that we've had over time in terms of the size of groups and the impact on learning. And so here's our best practice recommendation, is that we have found 16 to 20 participants is the perfect size. Absolutely perfect. You can have 4 breakout rooms or 5 breakout rooms. You can see everybody on the screen. You can interact. You can create this virtual intimacy. And it's, to me, the most effective. Now, we also know that going virtual creates tremendous scale. So larger groups are there. It's going to be less intimate, but you can create much more scale. So if you're having larger groups, then plan for different ways of delivering. For example, make more virtual learning rooms. We have a session coming up for 180 people. And basically what we've done is we've created worlds of 20. So we're going to have 9 worlds of 20 going through with 9 different facilitators to run it. Again, because I believe in that particular setting, intimacy is better. Obviously, larger groups, it's much more of the infotainment talking at people. But again, these are some of the best practices. Jason.
Rob, a couple questions coming at us.
Great.
We got, is a roadmap the same as an agenda? And then we have one more after that.
The answer to the question is no, a roadmap is different from the agenda. So as a matter of fact, let me just, I'm going to jump to that because I think it's the easiest way to answer the question. This is what we call a virtual learning journey roadmap. It lays out the entire process. And so this is a roadmap that one of our clients has engaged us with that we're starting to roll out in a couple of weeks. It is for upper middle level leaders who have been identified as high potentials. It is a 3-modular roadmap. So module number 1 includes about 7 hours of learning. Module number 2, about 7 hours of learning. And you'll see though, that those modules are broken up into phases, and these phases are being spread out over time. And so what it does is it really allows you to see the roadmap of the entire learning journey, who goes where, what's happening, and so forth, as opposed to just the agenda for a particular session. So I hope that answered the question.
A couple more good questions here. Do you have a debrief template / roadmap you have as a go-to when gleaning lessons from exercises or sim rounds?
We do. And that's something I would say is proprietary to us, but I would be happy, whoever that person is, and I don't know if you know their name, but if we wanted to talk offline, I'm comfortable sharing that with folks so that they see our approach. I don't know what others are doing, but because we've been ahead of the curve here, we've definitely developed some really nice proprietary tools.
And then we have another one from Stephanie Zoller. What about changing facilitators more frequently? How long of a session is too long?
That's a great question. And for that roadmap that I just shared with you, that I'll go into a little bit more detail, we're actually going to swap out 3 different facilitators so that we're going to have some freshness and different perspective over the 3 different modules. So we're running that program for about 90 people. And so facilitator 1 will do module 1, facilitator 2, module 2, facilitator 3, module 3. Again, just to give it some variety. So that's a great question from Stephanie. I love that question. And so we'll see how that goes. Excellent. All right, final rule number 10. It's called socialization. And basically it goes like this. You must, absolutely must provide learners with opportunities to network and build social relationships. Look, the truth of the matter is when we get together in person and when people fly from all over the world, sure, the learning is great, but a lot of times people will say, yeah, the learning was great, the simulation was great, but you know what really was awesome was I get to meet people from in my company I would never have gotten a chance to meet before, and now I'm building relationships. So the takeaway here is that you have to build socialization into virtual learning. Do virtual networking events and exercises. Have literally a cocktail party with people. Don't talk about the business. Don't talk about the learning. Get to network. Get the opportunity to have people build relationships. So what are some of the tools? Reunion webinars, leadership stories. So for one of our clients that we did early sessions with in terms of work, we're coming back every month and they're sharing stories of how they're taking their new leadership skills and applying them. And it's just kind of a round robin. We're giving people the chance to do follow-up role plays, peer-to-peer coaching. So there's lots of different tools for socialization. And I urge you, truly urge you to think about that as you start to build out your learning journeys. So question, Jason.
Yeah, we have another good topic here. Can you talk more, Rob, about the learning worlds for large groups? Do you have everyone together for certain parts to maintain scale? And then for certain parts, do you select the times to put people into small groups?
Yeah, good question. I'm going to actually go to the map here to answer that question. Um, I'm going to say this. I think it depends on the content. I think it depends on the audience. I don't think there's a one size fits all answer to that question. So let's think about large groups. And we've had the experience over the last 6 months. I think the largest group we've had has been 400 sales professionals going through an asynchronous simulation experience. And in that case, just kind of pushing it out, getting everybody together in one big room, giving them the instructions, flawless execution on what to do. It worked great. I think for other audiences where it's much higher touch, where it's much more important to give that one-on-one virtual relationship with, I don't see a way that once you get over 20, 25 people that you can have that intimacy. So in this particular version, what you're going to see, even though we have 90 people going through this particular learning journey, we're doing it in groups of 30. And so there's going to be 3 different tracks of 30 going through this. And what's also interesting, let me show you this. This is a global program. So we have North America and EMEA, and we're showing you the start times and the finish times. And concurrently, we're also delivering it.
Rob, we lost your audio there. It looks like your video is frozen as well.
It for folks. So it's a 20, sorry about that, folks. So I was sharing is that this is a 24/7 virtual delivery where we have 3 cohorts of 30 going through it at the same time. So I hope that answered that question, Jace.
Yeah, I think so. And then Rob, also from a technology standpoint, at least in Zoom and maybe in others as well, you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen probably, or maybe at the top, that there's 4 or 5 video screens. When you're in smaller groups and you only have 4 or 5 people, that's great. But
Yeah.
if you're trying to interact and share a presentation of some kind with 30, 40, 400 people, it becomes a lot more difficult to see who's on and off camera, who's sharing, who's not sharing, who's talking, etc.
Yep. Absolutely. That's great. All right. Something else I wanted to share. So I just shared with you the roadmap of what a great virtual learning journey could look like. And I know a number of you asked about simulation. So let me just pause for a second, share with you at a conceptual level, not at a selling level. What do I mean by simulations? What can they do? What do they do? How do you use them? So you're looking at a screenshot of one of our core virtual simulations called Hestia. And when I say virtual, I mean that this simulation actually lives in the cloud. And so what you're able to do with this is basically it's a flight simulator for business people. You have the opportunity either as an individual or within small teams to take control of this company called Hestia. And you have some information about the company. You understand where it is in terms of its key financials. You understand its competitors, the market conditions, and all of that information. This program itself, this simulation, typically is used in learning journeys where you're building up your business acumen, strategic thinking, financial management skills, marketing skills, supply chain skills, and so forth. It's also a fantastic simulation for building leadership, because imagine that you're in a virtual workshop and you are working with other people and you have to communicate with them. You have to coach them. You have to give them feedback. And so what you have here is the opportunity to take this case study, bring it to life, add characters, add scenarios, add different factors of learning to it, and it becomes the central piece of the learning process. And so the feedback that we have been getting has been phenomenal. From a technology perspective, you're able to run it and see it. Everybody has access to it. It's on their screen. They're in virtual breakout rooms. They're communicating with each other. And I'm about to say something that I never thought I would say. What we have learned so far is that the experience for the learners has been better. And I'm going to say that word. It's been better in a virtual experience than in person. One of the primary reasons, and I had no idea this would ever happen, learners have been saying to us, you know what's amazing is that I don't have to worry about my personal space. I don't have to be sitting next to another human being and worrying, oh my gosh, am I going to get sick from them? Or I don't, want to have a confrontation with them. You're able to have this emotional connection, but not be physically next to them. And working in the virtual breakouts, everybody can touch the screen in a way that you're not hovering around it. So it's been a really interesting experience. And that's what I mean, and wanted to share at a high level, different simulations. And there's lots of simulations that you can pick and choose from to give you that interactive experience. All right.
Rob, Jason, there's a question that came in to Jason.
And
Perfect time for that slide.
There you go.
Great. We have a question here. What are the key points to focus on in synchronous versus asynchronous deliveries? Would you please compare these modes? What about combination of both? And if so, what would you recommend for the relative length of each mode of delivery?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. And my gut answer is going to be this. All of this is so flexible. We've never had this flexibility before. And so what I mean by that is, in the traditional mindset that we've all had for decades of in-person, hey, somebody's getting on a plane, somebody's driving, you're going to a place, and you're just going to put it all out there. You have 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, and you just make it work. Well, now when we start to think about synchronous and asynchronous and what are the trade-offs, my answer is, I don't think it actually matters. I think it's going to put more opportunity on instructional designers, on the architects of learning programs, to really develop the learning journeys that best fit what you're trying to accomplish. So for example, when we're doing content, and let's say we're doing something on the introduction to financial statements, I think for that, Synchronous, live, online learning with Q&A and opportunities to talk is fantastic. However, now that I've learned how to read an income statement, give me a week to go play with it and practice it, and give me some tools and simulations and case studies. Let me do it on my time. I'm going to add an hour on Wednesday afternoon, and I'm going to add an hour on Thursday morning, and I'm going to do something over the weekend. And then when we come back, I've now done the learning and spent the time for me that I would never have in a traditional environment. So it's a great question. My answer is that it really depends on your competencies, your objectives, the audience, but you have incredible flexibility that we've never had before. Other questions? Anything else there in the queue, Jace? We'll open it up to the floor. Anybody on the call, we'd love to answer any additional questions for you. All right, well, I think I did a really good job of managing time. It's 53 minutes past the hour. And I hope this was really informative for folks. And
So
again,
we got one.
Oh, good, we got one. What do we got?
How do you suggest to include interactivity in webinars of 500 plus?
Ooh, that's interesting. Well, certainly I think polling becomes much more fascinating because you have so many more people. I'm not sure whether, a group of 500 plus people really would lend itself to breakout rooms and so forth. So I would think things like polling, I would think more videos make it interactive. So it's not just somebody talking at you. Exercises where maybe you do some drag and drops, but I just don't think for 500 people creating breakout rooms and that sort of level of intimacy would be great. I do think though that different sorts of things like simulations that you could push out to 500 people, let them work on their own, and then do like comparisons and leaderboards. Gosh, that would work really, really well.
A couple more here. What do sponsors get wrong about their application of digital programs?
Good question. I think I shared one of those with you earlier. I think the biggest thing they're getting wrong is they're underestimating the intellectual capacity of learners. And I think I've seen just a lot of babying of people in terms of the content. I also think that they underestimate the willingness of learners to dedicate the time if it's good quality content and good quality learning. If you're just throwing crap out there and you're signing up for any of those companies that just have millions of modules of e-learning and just putting it out there, it's not working, and it's never going to work because it's not interesting, it's not applicable, and it's not engaging. And I think that it's the easy way to check mark something. And I think sponsors are getting that completely wrong.
Okay, another question here. And I think this would be similar to how you would do a live, but how do you measure the level of understanding of participants?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, there's your traditional pre and post testing, but something that has been coming up more and more, and this week I've done 2 of them, is to actually correlate the results of simulations back to the competencies or things such as corporate values of people. So by way of example, one of our clients is a global insurance company, and they have a very sophisticated leadership competency model that they wanted to assess and evaluate how well people were learning about leadership and strategic thinking. And so we had all of them go through the simulation, and the simulation was calibrated to create an individual report for everybody on how they did spending, gosh, it was almost 15 hours over 4 years of time running their simulated company. And then they got a report back on how well they did. The sponsor was absolutely thrilled because it matched up All the things that were happening from this particular company was using Hogan in terms of an assessment tool. The simulation results were like 95% consistent with the Hogan report. And so that's a great way, and it's all virtual, all engaging.
Another couple questions here. How would you compare pricing level between synchronous and asynchronous delivery on the same topic? Equal, or is one higher than the other, assuming about a 16 to 20 participant level?
Yep. So, wow, it took 57 minutes for somebody to ask that question. That's not bad. Here's the very open, transparent answer to that. We've done a lot of analysis, and at our company, we track every minute of everybody's time. And the truth of the matter is that we recognized for us that for every 1 day of in-person learning that we delivered, it actually took us 1.1 days to get there and get back in terms of lost time. So in terms of development of materials, in terms of the delivery of materials, in terms of the licensing of materials, that's the same. It doesn't matter whether it's synchronous, asynchronous, live, in person, virtual, it doesn't matter. The travel does matter. So one of the things that we recognize is that it is less expensive from what we'll call the cost of goods sold perspective to deliver in a virtual synchronous methodology. However, don't get too excited, folks. It also requires more staff. All of those things that I talked about up front, aggressive preparation, having an executive producer, having contingency plans if the power goes out or the networks go out or something happens to the simulation. We actually added an extra body just to make sure things work. So the bottom line answer to the question is, my general rule of thumb is it's about a 20% discount in terms of net pricing based upon the methodology delivery. And I'm just being open and honest with everybody. That's where I think it's going to end up.
Great. And then we have a question. Hi, Amit. We have a question from Amit. Could you share your thoughts on role plays in a virtual setting, implementing Grow, how to structure, how to assess the learning?
Wow. Did we pay that person? That's a great question. So we do have a wonderful Grow coaching simulation that we've been launching around the world. And we also have a brand new technology that nobody else has. It's called Virtual Role Player, that allows two individuals to engage in a role play, a coaching dialogue using the Grow methodology. It's recorded. And then you can look at your conversation and you can assess how you did. We capture the data, we capture the feedback. You give people the opportunity to try it again. And it has been absolutely phenomenal in terms of the learning, the application, and it's shortening the amount of time that it takes for a leader to get good at executing that framework, because they're practicing and practicing, and it's scalable practice. And it's been absolutely amazing. So thank you for that great question. And if you want more information, we're always happy to give anybody on the call more information. And I noticed we're at the top of the hour, folks, so I want to be very cognizant of everyone's time. Our plan was to make this exactly 1 hour, because I'm sure you all have other things to do. But if there's any more comments or questions, I'm willing to stay on for a little bit longer. Does anybody need any additional help or have any other questions? Well, with that, let me offer all of you my personal thank you. This has been great. Thank you for these wonderful questions. Again, we'll have a hard copy of this deck with all of those best practices and rules available for you. We will send those out to you by the end of the day. And if you do have any additional comments or questions, please feel free to let us know. We'd be happy to answer them. So thank you, everybody. Be safe, be healthy, have a great weekend. This is Rob Roto signing off. Bye-bye, everyone.